Hello everyone and welcome to the first installment of the Jazz Flashes Videocast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez and I write both the Jazz Flashes and Vintage Bandstand blogs. And a couple of friends not long ago suggested that maybe I could start a videocast to publish in the blogs, to make available in the blogs, kind of harking back to the years when I used to host a radio show in Nashville. I liked the idea, and so I thought I'd give it a try, and this is the result, the first Jazz Flashes videocast. We are recording it in Martin, Tennessee, in the United States of America, and we're going to start on some sort of sorrowful note, because very recently we've lost two great jazz men. One of them, Bobby Hutcherson, vibraphone player, and Toots Thielemans, the Belgian both guitar and mostly harmonica player, and pretty good whistler as well. They both died in the month of August, just a few days ago, within about a week or so of each other. Bobby Hutcherson, he passed away on August 15th in California, and he was one of the most innovative, one of the most forward-looking and dazzling players on that instrument. He definitely modernized the vibraphone in the 1960s and 1970s, often playing with up to 4 mallets, 2 on each hand, and exploring free jazz and for a little bit even funk and jazz fusion. He was mostly known for his Blue Note albums of the 1960s and 70s, albums like Dialogue or Happenings or Total Eclipse. Those are about my favorite by Bobby Hutcherson. He was born in L.A. in 1941 and grew up in Pasadena. He started on piano, but one day he heard Milt Jackson play on a Miles Davis recording, and he became hooked on the vibes almost instantaneously. And I totally understand, because Milt Jackson was a fantastic vibraphonist in his own right. In 1961, Bobby Hutcherson moved to New York City and began playing at Birdland, and while there he began collaborating with great names like Grant Green and Hank Mobley and Archie Shepp and Eric Dolphy and Jackie McLean. In fact, he appears on One Step Beyond, a great album by Jackie McLean, and the 1964 classic Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy. By the way, Eric Dolphy at some point used to date Bobby Hutcherson's sisters, so they kind of knew each other personally before they began collaborating on records. In 1967, while living in New York City, he got into trouble with the law because of possession of marijuana, apparently, and so he moved back to L.A., and while there began collaborating with Harold Land in a quintet setting, if I'm not mistaken. And all throughout the 1970s, Bobby Hutcherson recorded some really good albums for Blue Note, dabbling in funk and jazz fusion for a bit, but always going back to the hard bop and the modal jazz that he became most famous and celebrated for. In the 70s, he worked with Dexter Gordon, with McCoy Tyner, and made some really good records throughout his career. Although, as I said before, the Blue Note recordings he made in the 60s and 70s are by far among his best work. He may not be as well known as Milt Jackson or Lionel Hampton, but he was one of the great innovators of the vibraphone, and definitely one of the albums that I would recommend everyone should listen to is the album Happenings, which is one of my favorite albums that Bobby Hutcherson ever recorded, one of those classic Blue Note albums that he made in the 1960s. I found a quote that he attributed to Eric Dolphy that I think is really interesting. It goes like this: "Music is like the wind. You don't know where it came from, and you don't know where it went. You can't control it. All you can do is get inside the sphere of it and be swept away." Rest in peace, the great Bobby Hutcherson, and if you are interested in listening to his music, do seek out those wonderful albums that he made in the 1960s and 1970s for Blue Note Records. Toots Thielemans may not be very well known either, at least not to everybody. And that he shares with Bobby Hutcherson. He is not widely known, but he is better known for some of his compositions. In fact, he wrote classics like Blue Set, and he recorded soundtracks for important movies like Midnight Cowboy. He contributed to French Kiss, for example, and he also plays the theme song to Sesame Street that I believe pretty much everyone is familiar with. He was born in Europe, born in Belgium, in Brussels in 1922, and he passed away just a few days ago on the 22nd of August, also in his hometown. He started on accordion and guitar. In fact, he was very much influenced by the great Django Reinhardt, and then concentrated on harmonica in his early teens. And he showed that the instrument did have a place in the world of jazz. He played with greats like Charlie Parker and Benny Goodman and Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, just to name but a few. And the great Quincy Jones once said about Toots Thielemans that he was one of the greatest musicians of our time. The first time that he ever visited the United States was in 1947, and it was then that he was introduced to the American jazz scene and played quite often in places like Miami and New York. In the 1950s, he went on a European tour with Benny Goodman, and he also worked with Charlie Parker in Philadelphia. He collaborated with the George Shearing Quintet pretty often, mostly on guitar, not so much on harmonica. But in the 1960s, he wrote Blue Set in 1961, one of his most famous compositions, and worked with Quincy Jones, leading groups and writing music for soundtracks. It was around that time that he wrote the music for Midnight Cowboy. Thielemans was also a much sought-after studio musician who felt at ease with jazz and pop and French music and Brazilian music, and he was always very fluent and very interested in the idiom of bebop. Made some of his greatest recordings within that style. One of them is 1957's Man Bites Harmonica. What a title for an album, but that's the title of it, and he recorded it for Riverside Records in New York City in December of 1957 and January of 1958. One of his best albums. He plays both harmonica and guitar on it, and he's accompanied by Pepper Adams on tenor sax, Kenny Drew on piano, Wilbur Ware on bass, and Art Taylor on drums. That definitely would be a good place to start listening to the great Toots Thielemans. I also have a quote that I've read, something he said, which is really poetic and something that sounds really deep to me. He said that he always felt best in that little place, in that little space between a smile and a tear. And if you listen to his music, you will definitely agree that that is a very accurate and a very poetic and a lovely description of his style. After talking a little bit about Toots Thielemans and talking also about the great Bobby Hutcherson, I got two albums here that I would like to briefly comment upon before the videocast is over. One of them is this album right here, The Right Approach by guitarist Dempsey Wright. And I really don't know that much about Dempsey Wright. Mostly all I know about him is what I could read in the liner notes of this album, written by John Tynan, an album that was released in 1958 for a small label called Andex. Dempsey Wright was born in Oklahoma, according to the liner notes. Charlie Christian and Barney Castle are two other guitarists who were born in that state and who became more famous than Dempsey Wright. And he was influenced early by Joe Venuti, Stefan Grappelli, Stuff Smith, and Eddie South. The reason for that being that he began on violin before he took up the guitar. In the late 40s and early 50s, he moved to California, and it was then that he concentrated on guitar. He had been playing on Western swing bands. In fact, Western swing and country music were two of his main influences when he started out in Oklahoma. But as soon as he moved to California, he became interested mostly in jazz, and the only record I have by him is this album, The Right Approach, which is a good example of West Coast cool jazz. Once he moved to California, he began playing with the Frankie Carl Orchestra. I can't believe he really played a lot of jazz, not a lot of cool jazz in any case, while he was working with Frankie Carl. But he also was a member of Harry Babesin's Jazz Pickers, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but in any case, Dempsey Wright played with Babesin for quite a while, even apparently appeared on TV with the Jazz Pickers, and it was a very forward-looking, kind of experimental outfit for its time, for the 1950s. The only album, as I said before, that I've ever seen by Dempsey Wright where he appears as a leader, the only one I have is this one right here, The Right Approach from 1958, which was cut in Hollywood, although I'm not sure exactly when the sessions took place. Richie Kamuka is on tenor sax, and Victor Feldman, the British piano and vibist, pianist and vibist, appears as well. Ben Tucker is on bass and Stan Levy is on drums. What a great combination right there, and all of them get a chance to solo, and although Wright does get a lot of the spotlight and actually gets a chance to shine in many occasions, the other musicians, particularly Kamuka and Feldman, get a lot of space to solo as well. I do really wish that Dempsey Wright had recorded more. I wish I knew more about him, but from this album, which is absolutely recommendable, and it has been released on CD by VSOP Records based on this album, I really think that it would have been fantastic if he had recorded some more, because this is an absolutely wonderful album. There's some music here associated with the great Count Basie, for example. Bill Holman takes care of the arrangements, and when Holman is arranging, you can be sure that the arrangements are going to be exciting and interesting and really cool, and they certainly are. It's a great cool jazz album from the 1950s, late 1950s, this Right Approach by Dempsey Wright in a quintet setting. And finally, as we are winding down this first videocast, Jazz Flashes videocast, I have another album here that I really enjoy. I've been listening to it quite a bit in the last few days, and it's this album right here called Red Norvo Plays the Blues. It has been reissued by Avid Records as a part of this 4 classic album series. And I must admit that I first heard of Kenneth Norvo. Was born in Illinois. Kenneth Norvo was the real name of Red Norvo. The first time I ever heard of Red Norvo was through Frank Sinatra. In the late 1950s, Frank Sinatra made some recordings in Australia, some live recordings in Australia with Red Norvo, and that was the first time I ever heard of Red Norvo, who definitely influenced Frank Sinatra. We think of the album Swing Easy by Frank. The sound of the Red Norvo Quintet, Red Norvo Quartet, definitely is an influence on that fine Capitol album by Frank Sinatra. And of course, in the 1920s, he played with Paul Whiteman. In the 1930s, he made fine recordings of his own, often with his then wife Mildred Bailey. Great singer, one of those white singers who really knew how to sing the blues. He was a very forward-looking musician, started on the xylophone and then moved to vibraphone in the 1940s, played with Benny Goodman as well, and eased into bebop in the 1940s and 50s. He recorded with Tal Farlow and Charles Mingus and Jimmy Rainey and Red Mitchell, so he was very fluent in the bebop language. Also collaborated with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie at some point in his career. And this takes us to 1958. That's when he recorded this album, Red Norvo Plays the Blues, for RCA Records. 7 tunes in all, really bluesy, all of them, showing off his accomplishment when it came to playing the blues. And some of the tracks have a small group, some of them a larger combo, but the people playing here with Red Norvo are just fantastic. Sweet Sadison, Don Fagerquist, they're both on trumpet. Ben Webster, Willie Smith, Harold Land are on reeds. Jimmy Rouse plays the piano. Jimmy Weibel plays guitar. And this is also quite interesting, on 2 of the songs, Helen Humes sings the way that Mildred Bailey sang on those early records in the 1930s. This definitely is a very recommendable album, and it's worth the price of admission of this Avid release for classic albums. There's other good albums on these. The other 3 albums are fine too, but my favorite is Red, Norvo Plays the Blues, which I recommend you seek out and listen to. It's an absolutely fantastic album. And talking about Red Norvo, we now reach the end of this first installment of the Jazz Flashes Videocast. I appreciate everyone's attention, and if I haven't done too bad a job, we may be back at some point in the future with more installments of the Jazz Flashes Videocast. Until then, follow us on Jazz Flashes and the Vintage Bandstand, and keep listening to wonderful classic jazz, which has been a passion of mine for a long, long time, and has brought and keeps bringing daily a lot of joy to my life. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and you have been watching and listening to the Jazz Flashes Videocast recorded in Martin, Tennessee in the United States. Thank you very much, and till we see you again.